Welcome to Real Bear Reviews, your paradise for movie lovers. Thank you for supporting our channel. Your love keeps us alive and growing.
This man was on his way to work when disaster suddenly struck. The man was lucky to survive. He knew this wasn't an accident, but that someone wanted to kill him. Sure enough, the villain returned not long after. This time, can the man escape? He even implicated his pregnant wife, who was about to give birth. To save his wife's life, the man had to follow the villain's arrangement and began his life-saving mission. The man's name is Frank. Looking at him now, he's a construction worker, but not long ago, he was a glorious member of a special rapid response team. In 2014, Frank graduated from the officer school with excellent results. Teachers and superiors had high hopes for him because Frank's father was also a member of the Special Forces team. He just sacrificed himself on a mission many years ago. Now Frank follows in his father's footsteps and inherits his innate climbing ability. The Special Forces captain also valued him greatly. On the day he graduated, the captain personally invited him to join the team and gave Frank his father's badge. Frank was deeply moved. When he wore his father's badge, Frank felt his father was always by his side. After joining the Special Forces, he trained diligently and his performance improved dramatically. During a routine training session, Frank discovered a girl whose performance was no less than her male colleagues in the same group. Her name is Leah. In their team, there was also a great marksman named Nico with extremely accurate shooting, hitting whatever he aimed at. Everyone originally graduated from the same school, trained together every day, and performed missions together, so their bond grew stronger. Frank, Nico, and Leah worked together perfectly. Frank had agile movements and flexible actions. Nico was a master marksman and Leah was intelligent, good at analysis and judgment. No matter how difficult the mission, the three of them could always work together to complete it. One day, Frank and Leah received instructions from their superior to pretend to be a couple for a mission. While tracking the target, the two sat in the car, their eyes met, and the atmosphere was a bit awkward. Just then, the superior gave the order. The target was approaching, so they had to act. The two got out of the car. To avoid suspicion, Frank took Leah's hand. Leah smiled and did not refuse. Although they knew it was just an act, they both enjoyed the process. Soon the target appeared in their sight. Leah pretended to have lost her parking ticket and was searching everywhere. She quietly went behind the target, coordinating with Frank to act at the same time. Since that time, their relationship progressed like a storm. When Nico's wife became pregnant with their second child, Frank began to have the idea of marrying Leah. He had always avoided marriage because of the nature of his work. Special forces always have to perform extremely dangerous missions. Frank was afraid that a family would be a burden to himself, and he was also afraid that his lover would be heartbroken if he was in danger because his father had died on a mission, leaving him alone. He didn't want his children to be like him in the future. But Nico, with his happy family, told him that without a family as a support and a clear head, he couldn't act rationally. Life with someone you love and with children is the happiest. So Frank and Leah got married. That day, Frank had just finished training and was on his way home when suddenly a loud noise came from the rooftop of the Royal Hotel. It could be a terrorist attack. So the three Special Forces members who were about to go home immediately put on their full gear and rushed to the Royal Hotel. But no one knew that tonight was destined to be a tragedy. Some people lost their jobs, some people lost their lives. Frank arrived at the hotel. They were only supposed to stay in the lobby to find hotel staff to confirm the situation. Because their numbers were too small, they had no intention of going up to confront the terrorists directly. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a guest came down, saw the Special Forces in the lobby, and immediately changed his expression, pulled out a gun and shot. Immediately, Nico was slashed in the neck by the terrorist, but he still bravely fired and killed one of them. Frank quickly dealt with the remaining one. Just then, the majority of the Special Forces team also arrived. Frank ran to Nico, disregarding everything, and used a cloth to stop his bleeding. He hoped he could hold on until the doctor arrived. But Nico did not make it. His main artery was severed, blood gushed out, and he quickly stopped breathing. Although Frank caught the culprit in this terrorist attack, Nico also sacrificed himself. The superior was furious and said it was due to Frank's command error. They were only 3 people and shouldn't have risked entering the hotel lobby. If they hadn't entered, the terrorist would have escaped easily and Nico would not have died. Frank was not convinced and said, "Should I have pretended not to see? Are my eyes just for show?" The superior could not forgive Frank's mistake, and the higher-ups needed someone to take responsibility. So Frank was fired. He once thought that he would sacrifice himself on a mission, thought that he would retire when he was old, thought that he would leave the Special Forces as a failure. He looked back at the badge his father left him. Both father and son considered Special Forces their lives' mission, but his father sacrificed himself bravely, while he had to leave in failure. Another TV channel also reported on the incident. However, the media all said that the terrorist was just a robber. They killed 2 guests in the hotel room to steal their property. But this was clearly a fabrication. Frank and another member of the Special Forces team, Lauga, who was also at the scene, could confirm that the terrorist had extremely formidable skills and was professionally trained, so he couldn't have been a normal robber. Unfortunately, now Lauga can't say anything. In this incident, Lauga was also injured and has now been transferred to an administrative position. After Nico's funeral, Leah also left her special forces job. This made Frank feel like a complete failure. He knew Leah loved this job. Her childhood dream was to join the special forces. But Leah comforted Frank. This is probably an opportunity. I don't want to build a family with no future. Do you want us to find a mediocre job and live a mundane life? But very soon, Frank found out Leah's reason because she was pregnant. Although now was not the best time to have a child, the baby's arrival was like a ray of light shining into Frank's dark heart. He had to shoulder the responsibility of a husband and a father. So the couple moved out of the Special Forces dormitory and began to decorate their new home. While tidying up their belongings, Frank discovered there was blood on his badge. This blood was from the terrorist that night. Frank secretly took the badge to the laboratory and entered the data into the database for comparison. Sure enough, he discovered the identity of the terrorist. This blood was from Salim, a former member of the Special Forces. He currently works for the Department of Homeland Security and often performs interdepartmental missions. Therefore, the two people killed in the hotel room were definitely not normal guests. There must be a conspiracy behind this. Frank told Lauga about his discovery, hoping Lauga could investigate the matter with him, but Lauga disagreed. He thought that if you can't cause trouble, you should avoid it. Reluctantly, Frank had to put the badge and the investigation results into a bank safe. As time went by, people would eventually move on from their pain. Today is Nico's youngest son's birthday. Frank and his wife organized a big birthday party for the boy. But Nico's eldest son, Anthony, showed no interest. The boy didn't want to see Frank and thought Frank had killed his father. Frank went to Anthony wanting to express his regret to the boy, but Anthony did not accept it. Do you know the truth behind my father's death? If you want to make up for it, tell everyone everything you know. Frank had been hesitant, but encouraged by Anthony, he no longer had any doubts. So the next day he met with a journalist to tell the whole truth about the hotel case that day. He hoped the journalist could make this public. Very soon, an employee of the Department of Homeland Security found the government minister and explained the truth of the incident. It turned out that 7 months ago, Colonel Joe of the U.S. Navy, also a CIA agent, and his bodyguard came to France to prepare for a large-scale arms deal with Australia. The Department of Homeland Security was very interested in this deal and sent 2 agents to get some important documents. As a result, Colonel Joe discovered them, and a shootout occurred between the 2 sides. The Department of Homeland Security agents were forced to shoot and kill Colonel Joe and his bodyguard. But just as they were about to leave the hotel, Frank led his subordinates into the hotel to investigate. A shootout occurred between the 2 sides in the lobby. This is also the reason why they concealed the identities of the deceased from the media. But recently they received a tip that Frank had obtained the agent's ID card and was about to make this public. If this matter was really exposed, the US would definitely be furious, and it would turn into a diplomatic crisis. The minister instructed to quickly retrieve the evidence. Frank was not allowed to say another word. Frank still didn't know that this time he had gotten into big trouble. He went to the hospital with Leah to a prenatal checkup without any worries. When he returned home, he found the house messy. Obviously a thief had been there. Leah began to feel that something was wrong because this was not the first time they had been robbed. How could Frank not know what the other party wanted? He found Lauga, hoping he could help him take care of Leah. Leah was going to give birth in 15 days. He didn't want anything to happen at this time. Because of Frank's excellent climbing ability, he found a job repairing high-rise buildings. One day, while he was working, an accident occurred. Frank was lucky not to die, but he knew the culprit must be nearby. He quickly slid down to the ground and happened to see the culprit run into a car. The car sped away, so Frank couldn't catch up. He ran home without stopping. Fortunately, Leah was safe. Meanwhile, the assassin failed to kill Frank. He was still chatting carefree in the car, unaware that the boss, Van Naken, sitting in the back seat, had already loaded a bullet. Van Naken decided that he still had to do things himself. Frank returned home. While Leah was asleep, he climbed onto the roof to retrieve the bank safe key he had hidden. He felt it would be safer to keep the key with him, so he planned to hide it in a drain. Unexpectedly, his sneaking around caught Leah's attention. Leah knew Frank was hiding something from her, so she forced him to tell the truth. Just then, a terrorist broke through the door and attacked the couple. Frank and Leah were both former special forces, masters who could fight a whole team barehanded, but the opponent was not weak, and there were many of them. Frank and Leah were gradually at a disadvantage, and finally, the couple was captured. The leader, Van Naken, demanded that Frank hand over the item, or his wife and child would not be safe. Van Naken first disabled Frank's phone signal, then took Leah away, and finally knocked Frank unconscious with a stick. When Frank woke up from his coma, Van Naken and Leah had disappeared. He received a video call from Van Naken. In the video, Leah was tied up and locked in a dilapidated house. That was Van Naken's hostage. He only had 4 hours. If he didn't hand over the evidence in his hand, Leah would definitely die. Not only that, now Frank also became a wanted man. Frank was yelled at by people on the street, and there were police chasing him. Getting the item from the bank safe within 4 hours was also a big challenge for Frank. Van Naken let Frank go. Frank first washed the blood off his body and then stole a jacket to cover the bloodstains. He wanted to go home to get the safe key, but found there were many police officers downstairs. The main door was blocked. Frank had no choice but to risk climbing onto the roof and then climbing through the window to enter the house. There were police officers standing guard at the door. Frank sneaked into the bathroom and found that the key he had hidden was gone. It was clear that the police had searched this house very thoroughly. Just then, the police officer standing outside the door walked into the bathroom and happened to see Frank. The police officers downstairs immediately took action. They chased Frank nonstop. Frank jumped onto the roof and was surrounded by several police officers. He used the roofs and pipes of the neighboring houses to jump down. He escaped right under the eyes of the police. Now there's a problem. He can't find the key. He can't get the item from the safe. Frank found Lauga, hoping he could help. I need some time to figure out how to save Leah. Lauga decided to stand with his old friend again. Frank first told Van Aken that he had gotten the evidence. So Van Aken sent Frank the address. They had 90 minutes left. Frank and Lauga went back to Lauga's house. Lauga's house still had quite a few Special Forces badges. Frank casually took one, put some of his blood on it, and wrapped it up as fake evidence. Lauga also prepared ammunition. The two drove to the hen location. When they were near the destination, Frank put a locator on himself and got out of the car alone to meet Van Aken's henchmen. He was tied up and followed them to a small house nearby. In the forest at last, he finally met Leah. Frank gave the badge to Van Aken. But Van Aken couldn't let Frank live in this world. He told his subordinate to use Frank's phone to send an email to everyone, and then left 3 men behind to execute Frank and Leah on the spot. But right after Van Aken left, his subordinate discovered a strange noise in the bushes. He went to check and didn't come back for a while. The remaining subordinate was a bit impatient and was about to go check when the first one returned. It turned out this person was Lauga, in disguise. The first subordinate had been killed by Lauga a long time ago. Lauga freed Frank and Leah. The 3 of them, armed, headed towards Van Aken's base to counterattack. At this moment, Van Aken was in a small house next to the forest to send a message to his superior. Suddenly, he heard 3 gunshots. He immediately realized something was wrong because his subordinates only needed to fire 2 shots to kill Leah and Frank. So what about the third one? Van Aken contacted his subordinates, but no one answered. Van Aken felt something was wrong and immediately picked up his weapon to defend himself. But it was too late. Frank and his wife and Lauga had arrived in front of Van Aken's abandoned house. Leah stayed outside to provide cover, while Lauga and Frank rushed in to confront Van Aken's henchmen. Frank attracted fire. Lauga, under Leah's cover, stole a car. The 3 of them got in the car and drove away. Van Aken was extremely angry. He and his subordinate got into another car and chased after Frank. The distance was getting closer. Very quickly, Van Aken's car caught up with Frank's car. The 2 cars continuously collided. Leah, who was pregnant, felt extremely uncomfortable. Frank held her in his arms to protect her. At this moment, Van Aken's subordinate opened fire. Frank could only shield Leah. Taking advantage of the opponent reloading, Leah fired. Fortunately, they temporarily blocked Van Aken's car. Frank discovered Leah was injured. Just then, Leah's water broke and she was about to give birth. It was a life-or-death moment. Frank resolutely jumped out of the car to attract Van Aken's fire. Lauga drove Leah to the hospital to give birth. Frank jumped out of the car, while Van Aken's subordinate continued to chase Lauga and Leah. As for Van Aken, he stopped the car to confront Frank. 2 patrol police officers passed by. Van Aken shot them both without hesitation. Frank saw the police motorcycle, his eyes lit up. He got on the motorcycle and sped straight into the forest. Van Aken also ran to another one. The 2 of them, one in front and one behind, rushed into the forest. The Special Forces police car arrived immediately after. They just managed to see the 2 motorcycles chasing each other in the forest. They immediately called the dispatcher to request reinforcements to capture the wanted man. Frank saw that the police cars were about to surround him. He quickly turned back, trying to shake them off, but that was not a long-term plan. While on the run, Frank discovered an old man camping in a field. The old man's motorized paraglider was parked next to him. So Frank got off the car, put on the paraglider, and flew up. Now the Special Forces police could only watch Frank with anxiety. At this time, Leah's condition was very bad. She lost too much blood, plus the labor pains. Her consciousness gradually became vague. Lauga continuously talked to her, hoping she wouldn't fall asleep. But Leah was getting weaker and weaker. Lauga sped up so much that the car almost flew. When he turned his head, he found that Leah was no longer making any sound. Lauga loudly called Leah's name, but Leah still didn't react. Lauga was extremely worried. Just then, Van Aken, relying on the locator, found Lauga's car and began to open fire. Lauga swerved to dodge, while Van Aken jumped onto a car behind to chase Lauga. Lauga was now under a lot of pressure, having to dodge the pursuer, watch the road ahead, and worry about the unconscious Leah. Just then Frank called. Lauga was like a drowning man clutching at a straw. He put the phone near Leah, hoping Frank could wake her up. But Leah still didn't react. Lauga could only drive faster and faster. But no one knew that Lauga was also injured. Lauga arranged to meet Frank at the park near the Palace of Versailles. But Van Aken also followed Lauga into the park. He saw Frank flying in the sky and immediately opened fire. At this moment, Lauga and Leah also reached their limit. Fortunately, the hospital was nearby. Lauga drove the car into the hospital parking lot. Just as he opened the car door and was about to get out, Van Naken rushed over. Lauga took the opportunity to shoot, hitting Van Naken. But Van Naken was as if he had a protective charm. He pushed Lauga out of the car and aimed straight at his old wound to attack. Lauga was hit and fell to the ground, unable to move. Fortunately, Frank arrived in time. He rushed into Van Naken and punched him continuously. At this moment, a familiar voice sounded. Frank's old teammates appeared. The Special Forces members, fully armed, pointed their guns at the teammate they once lived and died with. Frank didn't say anything to them but carried the unconscious Lia out of the car. When they saw Lia, everyone lowered their guns. Lia was taken into the operating room. At this time, the Special Forces escorted Frank away. Frank was locked in a cell. After she recovered, Lia brought their child to visit him. There was a twist in Frank's case. Because someone had submitted new evidence to the court, this case was elevated to a national issue. The judge declared Frank innocent and set him free. It turned out that when Van Naken and his accomplices broke into Frank's house, Lia had taken advantage of their carelessness to grab the safe key from the sink. After giving birth, she took the evidence from the safe and handed it over to the court, so her husband could be released from prison without any trouble. Finally, the family of three was reunited. Although this movie seems a bit cliché, and the entire plot has no outstanding highlights. Moreover, the film uses an interwoven storytelling method with flashbacks to clarify the ins and outs of the past, but the flashback part is too long, diluting the tense atmosphere that the film created at the beginning. Although the plot is just so, the action scenes in the film are still excellent. This is the first time I've seen such a fierce pregnant woman, who, despite being pregnant, still has agile movements and can knock out a French soldier with one punch. And Frank's friend, Lauga, is also very reliable. He always goes all out for his friends, which is truly touching. And the French government really did something wrong. They not only confronted their NATO allies but also spent most of their time busy with internal conflicts. What's important is that this matter was even brought up in a movie, which is truly surprising. The value of a movie lies in its reputation, and the value of a movie review lies in its feelings. Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching. What do you think of this movie?